everyone! So this video is on how to do walkthroughs that involve arrays. So in this particular walkthrough, which is from our workshop, we're seeing three new things. One, we're seeing this number defined statement. We haven't seen this before. We're seeing an array that's declared in main, and we're also seeing the passing of an array into a function. We haven't seen this before either. So this walkthrough is going to show you how to deal with each of these items in turn. So let's get started. Now, in this particular example, we're going to start with the very first statement, this number defined capacity for. This particular statement is another way for us to declare a constant. So we can declare constants by using the const keyword in front of a variable. That will make the variable a constant. And that is good for a lot of different situations. But for what we're doing here, that particular method doesn't always work, and it somewhat depends on what compiler you're using because of a issue with using variables inside the square bracket when you declare an array. So if you use the const keyword method, and you put that particular constant here, which is, you would think that would be perfectly legitimate, it would actually say, no, you can't do that because that's a variable and you can't put a variable into your declaration for an array. So for backwards compatibility, compatibility in general, you shouldn't use that method to do this. Instead, what you should do is you should use this other method for creating constants, which is to use this number defined statement. So what you're doing here is you're saying every time you see the word capacity, replace it with the number 4. That's literally what the statement does. So when we're doing a walkthrough that involves these preprocessor macros, okay, that's what they're called, what we should do is we should actually go through our code and replace every single instance of that word with the actual value that you're saying it is equal to. So what the compiler, what the preprocessor actually does is it's actually going to take this piece of code. Every time it sees the word capacity within this program, it's just going to replace this with the number 4. So if you're doing this walkthrough on paper, I would suggest simply crossing out the word capacity and putting the word 4 in every position where you see the word capacity. So I'm going to do the equivalent of that in here. So I'm just replacing every word with the number 4. Okay, because that's what will happen. So when you're doing the walkthrough, do that. Simply cross out the word capacity, put in the number 4 in its place, and then do the rest of the walkthrough. Okay, now let's continue on. So in the main, the first variable is called orchid. It is an array with 4 elements. And there's another variable named total. So just like before, we're going to have a table that's going to that we're going to use to define those two things. So here's my table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put orchid in one column, and oops, spelled that wrong, orchid. And I'm going to put total in another column. So my two variables have their own columns just like before, not different so far. Now, again, because I have functions, I'm going to put main here so that I know that this is a function call that is in main. That these variables are declared in the main function. Now, because orchid is an array, we can't just create a single column for it because there's literally 4 numbers in here. So what we do in the case of an array is we take this column and we subdivide it into 4 subcolumns. So this one column that has orchid is now going to become 4 columns instead of 1. And we note the index of each of the elements. So we're going to just simply go 0, 1, 2, 3. Those are the 4 indexes of that particular array, okay? Because it's a 4-element array, so there's 4 columns indexed from 0, 1 to 0 to 3, okay? 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's it. So in this case, to make it a little bit more clear, I'm actually going to switch over to purple for my actual data. That way I don't get mixed up between my index values versus what I'm storing in the array. Now, you don't have to do this, okay? This is entirely up to you. If you have a second colored pen or pencil or something, you can do this, okay? But it's not necessary. Okay, so let's get started. Now, the initial values of this array are 2, 1, 3, 5, so I'm going to put those into my array, 2, 1, 3, and 5. Done. Total's initial value is unknown, so I'm going to leave that alone. The next line, line 10, calls a function called printArray. Now, if I go down here, there's a comment at the top. Prints an array with space separating each value of the array. So if I kind of go through this, it looks like there is a printing of the number in the array, and there's a space here, and then a new line at the end. So when you see something like this, where there's actually a comment that tells you what the function does, the intention is that you don't actually bother doing the walkthrough on that one function. It's simply there because we have to do it this way because we don't actually have a way to print an array in C without running it through a loop like this. So that's why we're doing it this way. If there was a function that we can call to just like print array, we would. So we had to write our own. Okay, so don't walk through things that have been given to you. Okay, don't waste your time that way. So here, this is output. So what are we going to put in the output? Well, we're going to print the array orchid using exactly what we're given. So we're going to print the array called orchid using this print array function. So if I look at orchid over here, the numbers are 2, 1, 3, 5. So when I output, I'm just going to output 2, 1, 3, 5. That's it. That's all we have to do for that. So now we're going to make a function call to the rows function, and whatever it returns, we're going to put into total. So I don't know what goes into here yet, but it's whatever comes from rows. Now, because this is a function call, I'm going to make a long line, just like we did when we did the functions example. And I'm going to make the function call from main. Now, it's line 11 in main. And I'm going to call the function rows. So remember, I'm going to indicate this with an arrow over here to say that I'm making a function call to this rows function now. Now, when I make the function call to rows, obviously I have to track the variables that are inside the rows function. So that's what I'm going to do here. This rows function contains 4 variables in total. There's the blossom variable, which is passed in. There's RC, there's an I, and there's a J. So I need to track all 4 of these things. So that's what I'm going to do here. So blossom, RC, I, and J. Make this a little bit longer. So blossom, RC, I, and J. Now, you look at that and go, whoa, that's really, really small. Are we going to track all 4 numbers in here? Well, we're not. Because what happens when we pass arrays into functions, we actually don't get a copy of the array because arrays can be really, really big. This one is pretty small because it's only 4 elements, but arrays can actually be really big. So duplicating an array would be very, very costly. So instead of doing that, what we do is we only pass in where, well, we pass in, think of it this way. We're basically just referring to the array that's in main. Now, there's a bit more to it, and later in this course, we're going to talk about the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening. But for now, think of this as simply blossom is just another name for orchid. Now, there's several ways you can represent this, and I'll leave it up to you on how you would do it. You can simply point to the fact that blossom is really just orchid by drawing an arrow. That's one method. Okay? The other method is to keep in mind that, well, this is just orchid in main. So you can put orchid main. Okay? And this way you know where it comes from. And every time it talks about blossom, you can know, oh, it's just orchid in main, so I'm going to deal with it over here. So whichever method you think is better, go ahead and use that. I'm going to use the arrow method. It's up to you if you don't like this. You might find that this might be a little bit messy, so it's up to you, okay? But either way, what we're just saying is that, hey, blossom is just orchid, okay? And I should be a bit more careful about where my arrows end. I wanted to refer to that, okay? Blossom is just orchid. Now, Let's continue. Okay, RC, that's 0. So I'm going to use 0. Oh, I said I was going to change my color. This is 0. My I and J, initially it's unknown. So let's continue on. Now here's the for loop. Now pick out where the semicolons are. The semicolon is here and over here. So this statement that involves both an I and a J, that is the initialization statement for this for loop, which means that I'm going to initialize both I and J for this for loop. So I gets 0 and J gets 4 minus 1, which is 3. So we're going to put 3 into those two columns. Now, the continuation condition right here is I less than 4. So I'm going to do this as long as I is less than 4. And right now it is. And when we increment, we're going to increment I, but we're going to decrement J. So this is the last bit. Like, what do we do at the end of the for loop, right? So we're going to do that. Okay, here we go. So blossom sub I plus equals blossom sub J. How does that work? Well, blossom sub I, which is 0, so that would be this thing right here, right? We follow the arrow. Blossom sub I plus equals blossom sub J. Well, J is 3, so this is the 3 column right here, okay? So we're simply going to take the number that is stored in 2 here, and we're going to add 5 to it. So this is now 7, okay? And then what we do is we're going to add that number to RC, whatever blossom sub I is. So RC is going to be 0 plus 7. Okay? So I is currently still 0, right? So we read it out, we continue. Now, now we're at the bottom of this for loop. So that means that I goes up by 1 and J goes down by 1. So I becomes 1 while J becomes 2. Okay? I goes up, J goes down. So there we go. Now we check, is I less than 4? 1 is less than 4. So we're going to do this again. Blossom sub I plus equals J. So blossom sub I, well, I is now 1, so that's this thing here, plus equals blossom sub 2, which is this thing here. So that means that I'm going to take 3 and add it to the 1 and put it in. So this is going to be 4. So this is 4 in the second column here. And that's it for that statement. RC plus equals to blossom sub I. So this is 7 plus 4 because I is 1. So I is 1. So blossom sub 1 is the number 4. So RC gets 7 plus 4, which is 11. Okay? And continuing on. So again, I plus plus, J minus minus for this incrementing at the end, at the bottom of the for loop. So I now becomes 2, J becomes 1. Okay? I goes up by 1, J goes down by 1. There we go. And we continue on. So over here we have, we're continuing on with this. Blossom sub I, which is now at 2, plus equals blossom sub J, which is now at 1. So 3 plus this 4 is going to give me 7. So this number is now 7. And what we do is we then say RC plus equals blossom sub I. Well, that would be this number right here, because blossom sub I is now 2. Okay, I should cross these out. I is now 2, so blossom sub I is this number right here, this 7 right here. Okay, so what that means is we're going to, so blossom sub I is equal to 7. Okay, and oh, sorry, we haven't had it yet, have we? So this number plus 7 gives us 18. Okay? And that's it for this one right here, RC plus equals blossom sub I. Again, we go back to our I plus plus and our J minus minus. So I plus plus makes the 2 3, J minus minus makes this 0. Is 3 less than 4? And it is. So we're going to do it one more time. Blossom sub I plus equals blossom sub J. So blossom sub I is here, this 5, right? And we're going to add on to it this number right here, which is J blossom sub J, which is the 7. So 5 plus 7 gives me 12. Okay? I think, yeah, 12. And then we're going to take this, and then we do this. RC plus equals blossom sub I, so 18 plus 12 gives me 30. And we, again, increment I and decrement J. And we check, is I less than 4 at this point? Nope, 4 is not less than 4, so we're done. So at this point, we're finished with this part, with this loop. Okay, we're finished with this loop, and we're back to our return statement. Our return, in this case, is RC. So what we're going to do is we're going to return that number back to our calling function. That number happens to be the number 30. Now, I'm just going to make a quick note to myself that that's what I'm returning here. And we're going to put that number into total. So this function call results in total, which results in 30, sorry, which we assign to total. So total now is going to get the number 30 in it. And that's it. The function is over. This is effectively finished. We can ignore this at this point. And we're back into this part. So now, the last thing that we do is we're going to print the array first. So we have 2 statements left. Print the array, which is just going through that ORCID array and printing it out, which is 7, 4, 7, 12. And then printing out the total, colon, followed by the number for total. So total, colon, and then total, which is 30. And that's it. This is, in effect, how we do a walkthrough that involves an array, and what happens when we pass the array into a function, and how it refers to the original. So we have to note which array it's referring to so that we don't update the wrong array. Okay? That's it. Thanks, everyone.